It is now 27 minutes to 8 o'clock, time for us to look and review what has been making headlines over the week. With me, we have Bob Njagi, Gloria Oroba, and Mark Bichachi, and we continue. So before we took the break, we were just looking at an article on the Standard where apparently, those groups, illegal groups, may spring up again as we get into 2022. And the question, very briefly, Mark, to give you an opportunity, was what do you feel is the root cause for these groups to continue?
We have argued a lot and talked about poverty and talked about many things, but I'll talk about one issue in particular that is close to my heart as a communicator. It is the unfortunate statements of leaders and analysts on shows like this and people who have influence. I'll give you an example. When you say on national television that you cannot dichotomize and differentiate between an ODM supporter and violence, that is an unfortunate statement. What it serves to do is, number one, it makes people who support ODM feel attacked, and then it makes those who feel that they should attack ODM supporters feel supported. But you see, the problem with such statements is you must ask yourself, the policeman who shot Baby Pendo, was he an ODM supporter? When Mungiki was raining havoc, was that an ODM issue? When we see clashes in Molo, is it an ODM issue? And are you also, in that statement, trying to say that the people of a certain region in this country are violent? Now, these are the issues we must address. We must measure how we speak. We cannot generalize. Even one of our panelists here was an official within ODM at some point in his life. Is he violent? These are the issues we must address. We cannot just come out with blanket statements that hurt people and expect there not to be consequences. Violence occurs because our tongues have been sharpened, first and foremost.
You've got your point, and I guess we shall now move on to some of the things that have been making headlines. I don't know if, Gloria, you wanted to give a rebuttal to that. I think he was referring directly to what you had said earlier on. And it is true, when we generalize, then it can be a bit of a problem. Would you like to give a rebuttal to that, Gloria?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I stand by my word. I said, and I will say again, just like you cannot dichotomize Raila Odinga and the Building Bridges initiative, is the same way that every time the ODM followers or Raila Odinga followers are trying to push an initiative and it appears that the initiative is not being popular or being, accepted by everyone, they come to give us these statements where they are trying to sell fear, where they are trying, look at what Honorable Otindo Mole posted yesterday. Look at what they are trying to tell us. Oh, if we don't sit down and talk, if we didn't have Building Bridges initiative, we are going to be like Sudan. But that is exactly what it is. And when I say you cannot dichotomize the Building Bridges initiative and ODM, and Raila Odinga, it's simply saying that without Raila Odinga, there would not have been the Building Bridges initiative. So, and every time, look at it from 1982 all the way now. Look at the history that we have had with violence, with destabilization within the political arena, and try and tell me who or which side of the divide or which particular person has been constantly involved. So for me, let's not also come here and try to sanitize situations. Building Bridges initiative was an initiative because of the handshake of Raila Odinga and our President Uhuru Kenyatta. Because of that, we are talking about a referendum, whether to go for a referendum or not. Because of that, we are now heightened. Everybody's talking about new seats that have been created. Do you want us, I really challenge Mark, would you like for us to come to studio and tell lies to Kenyans? I don't subscribe to that. Right. I am very pragmatic on the things that I come to speak of here in studio, and I'm very factual in certain things. And by the way, Mark, please go and look at the meaning of dichotomize.
All right, and Mark, as you check your dictionary, I'm sure Google has that word dichotomize.
I don't need to check my dictionary. Dichotomize is to distribute into two different categories. And when she did not talk about BBI, she said you cannot separate supporters of ODM and violence. She's revising her statement and hiding and trying to say it's about BBI and the handshake. And she must be reminded that there were tribal clashes in 1992, in 1997. Was Raila Odinga in charge of that? Was Raila Odinga in charge of those communities when they were fighting? You see, it is easy to heap blame on one person and his supporters. My issue, you can blame Raila Odinga, he's an individual, but you cannot say the supporters of ODM are violent. That is unfair. I'm not in ODM, but I would never say such a thing. It is irresponsible.
And I believe
that we can stand for it is a shame to this country.
All right. I think it is clear it is unfair to generalize violence or negative in any way. What we were discussing here is criminal gangs, which have been used by politicians, and we know they continue to be used. But that article is on page 12 of the Standard, and I advise that you get that article. But as I mentioned earlier, this is the right time to have that discussion. So come 2022, we are not found flat-footed. But let's now change gears and look at some of the happenings of this week. And one of the things that was announced is the release of the Huduma card, which, of course, had a lot of questions being asked. But finally, a year has been given. By 12th of December 2021, you should have your Huduma card and your Huduma number, failure to which you're likely not to get government services as you would please. So let me start with you, Bob, on your thoughts on this and the importance of the Huduma card in your view, if at all it is important. Or do you think, like it had been said earlier on, that this was just a way of government making money?
Thank you, Mike. Before I respond to the issue of Huduma number, I would like to correct my colleague Gloria. First and foremost, as I'm seated here today, I am the Secretary for Humanitarian and Disaster Management Affairs and a NEC member of the Orange Democratic Movement. I have also been the first Deputy Director of Elections, deputizing Junet Mohammed, who is the Director of Elections in the Orange Democratic Movement. Therefore, I do not take Gloria's sentiments lightly, because this is an affront to the party and the party leader himself by associating we who are members of ODM with violence. I am a Kenyan, and I'm a peace-loving Kenyan, and I have never been involved in such kind of acts of violence. And it is very unfortunate remarks coming from a colleague whom we are sharing the same studio with. It is actually insulting, to say the least. But that said and done, I'd also like to tell Gloria that not all ODM members, like myself, are supporting the Building Bridges initiative. That is why we have gone to the Free Kenya Popular Initiative, which is a people-driven popular referendum for the people, by the people, and of the people. So don't balkanize. The issue of balkanizing people into ODM people, Jubilee people, we are all Kenyans, and we all mean well for this country. So I wish you can take back those unfortunate remarks about the party. But going forward to the issue of Huduma number, Mike, again, I have an issue with the Huduma number myself. I have not taken it up myself because we had issues with the way the Huduma number was introduced to the country. The Constitution of Kenya says that before such an initiative is taken by the government, there has to be sufficient public participation, civic education had to be done, and this was not done before the Huduma number came. We were bombarded with the number, and I remember at the time when it was being introduced, the Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Musalia Mudavadi, they all went out of the country, all the parts of the country, to popularize the Huduma number. But you see, we are giving out personal information to the state. There has been no laws that have been passed in Parliament in terms of data protection, all right? Where is this information being kept? Who is using this information? What is it being used for? All right? There are so many unanswered questions about Huduma number. Secondly, Mike, people who voted for the Jubilee government voted for this government to give them services, Huduma, not numbers, all right? So we don't want numbers. What we want is roads. We want schools. We want hospitals, all right? We want jobs for the youths. But if you're asking for services and the only service you're getting is a number, I don't see the magic in a number, all right? So the Constitution provides that as long as you have a national identity card, you're free to get any services provided for by this government, with or without a Huduma number. The Huduma number is a voluntary thing. It is not a must for any Kenyan to have it, and this should be made very clear to the state and to those who are pushing this agenda of the Huduma number. I give it to them because they want to integrate the services and provide faster services to the people. But that should not come as a primary agenda. Agenda number one for the Jubilee government was housing, food security, health, and manufacturing. This is what we want to see the government doing and engaging itself on a day-to-day basis.
Let me hear your thoughts on the Huduma number, although one might argue that it's simplistic to think that just having the number is something. I would imagine that government is trying to put all our records into one, but yes, there's the argument that with the ID number and maybe a passport, they already have that. Mark Bichachi, do you think the Huduma number is a good idea in terms of having all our data collected into one place for us to get better services?
Let us look at the facts as they are today. Number one is that if you go to NHIF does not speak to NSSF, and NSSF does not speak to the Registrar of Births and Deaths, and the ID system has been abused. As we know, a lot of terrorists have come into the country, gotten fake IDs, and there's been a lot of issues within that particular sector. So is it true that the merging of all these records and the merging of information will help the government give these needed services to Kenyans in a better manner? Then yes, that goes without saying. It is not something to be argued about. However, the issues of where our data sits, how it is managed, is a key question in this country. And it's not just a Huduma number. Look at how we enter buildings. You enter a building, you write your name, you put your ID number, and you put your phone number, and you sign. What are you signing to? And where does that book go? What do they use that information for? So the use of personal data in this country is a big issue, which is why the BBI report actually has a constitutional amendment to include the right of privacy in that particular document. The other issue is this, that we as a country need to understand that we must embrace progress. Okay, there was a need to create a smarter system by which our ID cards are rolled out. Your ID card needs to do much more than identify you. So for example, the Huduma card has a chip on it so that it's able to gather more information when you need certain services quicker. It is supposed to shorten the services. It's supposed to digitize the services more. And it's the same thing that happened when we launched e-Citizen. So I would urge my fellow citizens to give the government a chance. The president came out very clearly. He took journalists and cabinet to where all of these things were being done. It is not something that's being used to rig the 2022 elections, as some people had alleged. So for me, from a very pragmatic standpoint, yes, we do need an integrated system. And two, we also do need to look at our laws around data security, which again is a good thing that it is included in the BBI and that the fact that we're having a conversation about it.
All right, Gloria, your thoughts on the Huduma number and how it would benefit Kenyans, looking at it from the angle that it's bringing all our data together to ensure that, like Mark says, your ID does not just identify you, but has way more data that can be used effectively.
Mike, I happened to have worked in a data center at a very senior position. I actually worked at the Facebook data center in Denmark, in Odense. And all they do there is store your data. You know, you post a picture or you write something and it goes to a server and it goes to a rack, it goes to a disk and it's stored somewhere. And it's used for all sorts of things. You cannot even imagine the amount of data they have over you and what they use it for. So for me, when I think of Huduma number, I think of two things. First, as a single source of truth, which is a very good thing, because then you can have an integrated system where an offender, for instance, will not go to a different court and, you know, they might not be able to, you know, pull up the files that they had of this person from, you know, the police station or whatever. It's a single source of truth, which is a very powerful tool. Now, the question is, are we actually starting from a basis where we are setting ourselves up in a point where we are protecting the privacy of the citizen? And so for me, when I look at the data protection laws that we have, they're very weak. The one thing that I've been pushing for is that we have to push for a policy that says that all our data in Kenya used by any applications, whether it is Facebook, Instagram, whoever, it has to be stored locally. By storing it locally, what we are actually trying to push is all these big organizations, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, whoever, they will be forced to come here and set up infrastructure in terms of data centers. One data center, Mike, actually employs up to 1,000 engineers, and the domino effect around that in terms of, you know, just even the food they're going to be using, job opportunities for the youth, and all that whole sector will be pushed. But then we have our cabinet secretary, Joe Musheru, sitting there and telling us now we have a new data commissioner, we have this and this. We are really thinking small. We're thinking small about an initiative which can actually generate not only job creation for the youth, but it can bring us to a place where I'm not afraid to give my details to government, because I'm absolutely sure that government has put in place a system where they are going to protect me, and these details are going to be used for my benefit.
All right.
Yeah.
And Bob, maybe, hopefully, you've been won over by the panelists in terms of the Huduma number. And I hear and understand your concerns in regards to data not being that protected. Even our data laws need to be refreshed and possibly tightened for us to have that. But even if we think about how much data we leave out there, if you fly right now, they're collecting data for, you know, follow-up in case of COVID-19, but nobody knows where that data goes. It has your personal information, has your email address, has your telephone number. What really government is doing, from what I hear, is that they're trying to consolidate all that. Don't you feel that that's a step that we need to take for us to be at least more current in terms of our data and having it more effective in the government, files?
Agree with my co-panelists, especially Gloria. Indeed, data, or rather collection of data and use of data, is very critical for planning and developing any nation, especially towards strategic planning. But Mike, our issue is that we have not yet developed laws that can protect Kenyans from abuse. You see, this kind of information, if it falls on the wrong hands, people could use that information to even rig elections. People can use such information for the wrong purposes, all right? So there has to be adequate and sufficient laws that protect data use, data storage, data protection, data privacy, all right? And as Gloria is saying, if we would have this data stored here in Kenya, you see, with Huduma number, it's not even a Kenyan thing. It is a foreign project, actually funded from outside. And the whole issue is to bring together a one World Wide Web, okay, where all citizens will be under one network, all right? And you see, we have to be careful about such kind of initiatives. I'm not trying to create fear, but what I'm saying, Mike, for instance, in the 2017 elections, we had a problem with data protection. We could not protect the results from the elections, from the servers, right? Until today, the servers have not been opened, and that is data which we put our fingerprints, all right, and they said it's an electronic election, and an electronic election cannot be rigged, all right? But what happened? We had the algorithm for 54%, and until today we have not resolved this issue. And then you're telling Kenyans to give you more information, more data, which is private, so you can keep it and then use it again.
All right.
So we are not boarding that bus.
All right. Evidently, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, but because of time, I want us to move on to something else very briefly. Briefly.
For me, the question I'd like to ask our new data commissioner is, I have the freedom to give you my data, whether it is my biometrics or whatever. I want to understand the process when I come in as a citizen and say, actually, I want you to delete my data from your database. Show me the end-to-end process of that, because it is my right to actually access the data that you have that government has of me, and it's also my right to say, now that I understand you're not using this particular data, I would like for you to delete it. And we don't even have that process. Yeah.
All right, I guess there's still a lot of work to be done, but let's now change focus and look at a story on page 2 of the Standard, and that is Ghetto man haunting Museveni. This is what's going on in Uganda, and just to get your thoughts on this before we wind up, because we do know that Uganda is going into elections. Museveni is going for his 6th term, and there seems to be a lot that needs to be worked on in terms of the democracy. Let me start this this one with Mark Bichachi, or you're weighing in on what's going on in Uganda.
You know, what's going on in Uganda is a man who's overstayed his welcome and is trying to use brute force to stay onto power. And unfortunately, given the instruments of state that he controls, it really doesn't matter how popular Bobi Wine is. I'm sure Museveni is looking to use alternative means to access a presidency. But that said, there's a statement I said last year, and I'll repeat, and I hope people in Uganda are watching. There was a boy, he was called David. There was a king, he was called Saul. Like Bobi Wine, David was a singer. Like Saul, Museveni has been rejected by God and the people. We know how this story ends.
You're weighing in on, I don't know if you also have scriptural reference to what Museveni is likely to face.
For me, I think one thing that strikes me is when I see an individual like Bobi Wine really taking up that initiative and saying, you know, this is my country, this is what I want for my country, and I'm going to absolutely do whatever it is that I can to take my country to this direction. I really think about it from a point of, you know, inspiration. That is what our youth should be doing. They should be coming up to these tables and saying, actually, enough is enough with this kind of bulldozing on certain things. We don't have to go to the streets. You can do that very civilized in boardrooms. You can do that civilized by writing your articles, which people always say you've written articles and so on. You can do that by just the advocacy work around your spaces and in your communities, because it doesn't matter how long you'll be suppressed. There's a book that I keep referencing by a lady called Ingrid Betancourt. She ran for presidency in Colombia, and it says, even silence has an end. It means that at one point, you know, you're going to break free from whatever it is that you're trying to push from.
But protesting is still also a constitutional way of getting a message across, which should not be met with violence.
Absolutely, and and this is how now where you start looking at how government engages protesters. You know how, for instance, now you talk of the issue on police brutality, because if the police also understand we are both here, we are both Kenyans, we both own this country, and these guys are just out here, you know, demonstrating and trying to get the attention of the leaders, then I'm not supposed to be tear gassing you. But then if now you talk about a government that understands, you know, our human rights, a government that understands democracy, a government that respects the youth and that the youth need to be brought to the table, then you don't have, you won't end up having these clashes, because both of us, or whichever, the police, whoever, will understand this is actually a civic engagement. This is protesters coming out here just telling us what they want, and then after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, they'll go home and the leaders will sit in the news, and you know, life goes on.
All right,
yeah.
And maybe Bob Njagi, your namesake is rocking Uganda. What message would you have to the Ugandan government had you had a chance to do that?
My friend Bobi Wine is in custody as we speak, and the people of Uganda have lost so many lives. Over 200 people have been reported dead only the last few days. President Yoweri Museveni, my request to him is that time has come for him to go. In 2002, we had a similar situation in Kenya when it was Moi's time to go. I would only ask him to listen to the will of the people, all right? Listen to the will of the people. We love Yoweri Museveni. We love him as our elder statesman in East Africa. We love him so, so much, but the direction that he's taking the Pearl of Africa is the wrong direction. My prayer to Uganda is that there can be healing and there can be reason. Change is coming to Uganda for sure. Change is coming to Uganda.
And as we conclude, we only have a few minutes. Let's focus on the United States. Mark Bichachi, your thoughts on what's going on? Donald Trump has still not conceded. He still has brought no evidence whatsoever. And, you know, there are times we look at ourselves in Africa and imagine that democracy is not working only for Africa. But it looks like even in the States, things don't work as automatically as you'd expect. Maybe as we conclude, very briefly on your comments on the States.
Well, the Donald has taught us one thing, that it does not matter how great an institution you build. If you put the characteristics of Sonko, Trump, Waititu on top of that organization, you will see chaos. That is what Trump has proven. It does not matter how civilized you are. Number two, if you take the route of divisiveness and hate, then you can also convince people to follow you to the abyss. People are ignoring the economic numbers, the COVID numbers, and still 70 million people voted for Trump. Why? Because hate sometimes is stronger than logic, and that is something we should be afraid of. We should shun divisive politics, we should shun fascism, we should shun classism, which is why, for me, hustler, dynasty narrative, same what's up.
All right, Bob, your comments on the United States and what's going on there?
Yeah, Mike, change has come to America, and it's clear that with the confirmation of Georgia voting for Biden, and they have recounted the votes to the last vote, and it is clear that Biden is a winner. So what President Trump is doing at the moment is very unfortunate. I think he should be more responsible for his actions, because the actions of a president such as him have a lot of implication across the globe. Right here in Kenya, we have seen that with every change of government, there is also a change in foreign policy. It is very notable that what I can say is that the Building Bridges initiative was heavily supported by the President Trump. Now that we have a new administration, I hope the American government is listening, and they will not interfere with the sovereignty of the African people. We are a sovereign state as a Kenyan people, and we want ourselves to lead any kind of changes in our country, especially on the referendum.
All right, Gloria, you get the last and final word, briefly.
There are a lot of negative things that are being said about Trump, but if I were him, I would just think of it this way. You should always plan to live on a high note. Yeah? I mean, you can say all sorts of things about him, but he is the first entertainer who actually became the president of the United States of America. And he is the first guy outside of the inner circle, outside of the dynasty, outside of whatever you want to call the system, that actually broke that barrier and got into office. And, you know, and he's actually the first, you would say, guy who had no clue on policy and governance that managed to stay in office that long. So for me, if I were him, I would say, you know what? You know, those are things you can put on your shoulder and live on a high note and just, you know, concede. But the lesson for Kenyans to learn, and I was laughing when Bichachi said it doesn't matter how high of a system you put, but as long as you have people like Sonko and Waititu, then, you know, it doesn't matter. For me, I think that is an inspiration, that we build our systems to a point that the nobodies, those people that Bichachi is talking about, Sonko and who are nobodies, who are absolute, what you want to say, scam, bottom of the food chain, could actually get into those systems, govern us, fail or not, you know, succeed. So for me, I think the lesson learned here is that it is really the American dream. He's a symbol of the American dream. Anybody can make it. And so in Kenya, we're also trying to push where we are not only talking about dynasties, that even you as a hustler, you can actually get into office.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess because of time, we'll have to wind up right there. Thank you very much, Bob Jagi, Chairperson, Free Kenya Popular Initiative, Gloria Oroba, who's a youth policy analyst, and Mark Bichachi, who's a communication strategist. Thank you for joining us this morning on Morning Express. For now, we take a break, but do stay with us. Brian Eseli is going to be coming in with hot topics and celebrity chat after the break. So we take that break.